Active Life survey, some different breakdowns here from different groups, and the percentages there speak for themselves. I'm not going to read those to you, but again, it's just interesting to reference how different young people are responding and how COVID has impacted on their physical activity levels as well as their interest, and their engagement, and you're probably starting to see that a lot more in school now. I know that we're talking to schools again now, and we're finding that the children coming back into school, and a lot of schools are prioritising a lot of play, a lot of physical activity, a lot of breaks from the classroom, rather than bringing them straight back in and focusing hugely on attainment levels and catch-up curriculum, which I'm sure is a term that's being bandied around your school. And just to add to these statistics, some infographics from Youth Sport Trust around another survey that's been done recently. Some very interesting facts in here that have come directly from parents about their kind of expectations, I suppose, on schools, but also their concerns about whether or not their children are getting 60 minutes a day. So just to reiterate, as most of you know, 60 minutes a day is the recommended guidelines. 30 minutes of that 60, the responsibility sits within schools. But obviously the other 30 sits within the family settings, the at-home setting. But interestingly, I think for me, the most important element on this slide is that 64% of parents now believe that children's well-being is more important than their academic attainment, which is really interesting. And as I was just saying before, a lot of schools are now prioritising children's well-being and using physical activity as a tool to improve well-being, just to get children back into school and getting them comfortable with the environment, not so much massive focus on the curriculum. However, we have got a session later on where Teach Active will be talking very specifically about how you can use physical activity within the curriculum, or to deliver the curriculum, and how important that is to make maths, English lessons as active as possible. So that's the kind of opening piece from me. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Ali, who is going to introduce one of our guest speakers for today. So Ali, over to you.
Thanks very much. And Steve, if you can get ready and unmute your mic. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So Holy Family School in Addleston is a 219 pupil primary school, part of the Xavier Catholic Learning Trust. Since its conversion to academy back in 2016, it's now got 14 other schools is joining in that trust. Most recently, it had a good Ofsted rating back in November 2018. Inspectors noting a high proportion of pupils making strong progress and reaching very high standards in reading, writing, and mathematics. Also, the overwhelming majority of pupils enjoy coming to school and have a love of learning. Through Steve's leadership at Holy Family, the primary school has transformed attitudes, learning, and outcomes through an active school movement. One of their most impactful uses of the sports premium recently has been the investment into a scheme called Teach Active, which you can learn more about later on. I'm very pleased to introduce Steve to talk to you about how he's positioned and improved a range of outcomes, including health and wellbeing, through both a whole school and targeted school approach. So first off, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Very welcome.
What was the impetus for you to make the commitment to embedding an active school movement?
Well, I think whether you're a head teacher, a senior leader, or an NQT, we all want the same thing for the children we serve, and that is we want them to be successful. People do look at success in different ways, but essentially, if we were to write a list, we'd want them to be really happy, to have good mental health and well-being, to progress as much as they can, to get high outcomes, to be really enthusiastic about coming to school, to have high attendance, to have a good set of interpersonal skills and life skills. We wanted all of that. And I was 23 years a class teacher before going to Holy Family. I had active teaching at the heart of everything I did from the moment I started, and it seemed to work for me. So successive head teachers said I was doing a good job. Ofsted said I was doing a good job. But children, I was lucky. I was a popular class teacher. Children enjoyed being in my class, which is always a nice thing to have. And they did really well. So naturally, when I went to Holy Family, I wanted to make an impact. I was going to draw on something that I really believed in and I really knew was going to work. And even back then, in 2012, off the back of the Olympics, there was a huge amount of research and evidence out there to tell us that active learning really, really works. and also to start putting out some real danger signs for the flags of things that were going wrong across our nation, you know. And now, 8 years on, coming out of the pandemic, it has never, ever been more important for schools to focus on physically active learning at the heart of everything they do. And I know the people on here will be absolutely behind me. So there are still too many schools and too many leadership teams, sadly, who haven't actually understood that fully. But we've got to look. We can't ignore the statistics. You know, 35%, Wendy's mentioned some of them, 35% of our children leave primary school overweight or obese. And it's particularly pronounced in certain demographic groups, including children of low income. We've got to address this. You know, the gap is going to get wider if we don't address it. Wendy mentioned Sport England and Youth Sport Trust. You know, the Children's Society survey last year suggested that, or said quite clearly, young people are the least happiest they've been in the last decade. Nearly 250,000 young people filled in the survey to say they were suffering from low well-being. And this latest study out across Europe, 24 countries across Europe, our 15-year-olds in the UK, the highest fear of failure, the highest levels of anxiety, and the lowest levels of life satisfaction across the whole continent. And if you put that together with the fact that our school leaver outcomes aren't great compared to countries who adopt a different attitude, more a health and well-being attitude, we've at least got to sit there today and moving forward and think, is it really working, or should we be looking at embedding something different? And I would suggest that having an active learning movement is going to do all the things you want it to do.
Fantastic. What a great start of an answer there, Steve. So I know it's hard to unpick all the different things you do, but what does active learning look like at Holy Family? We can go back one slide, it's just for now.
I think it's important to say it's not about running around the playground at 90 miles an hour all the time. There's always an element of movement in an active learning lesson, but essentially it's based on a theory called constructivism, which means that learners build or construct their own learning using prior knowledge, prior experience, prior skills, and the teacher skillfully scaffolds it so that learners take ownership of their own learning. So you'll see children out of their chairs, not all the time, we do sit at desks and do work, of course we do, but it's the type of lessons as a teacher you love teaching, those lessons where you get a real buzz. So your debates, your discussions, your investigations, your experiments, your group work, your detective sessions, treasure trails, all those things that make children actively get involved, because what we mustn't do is just get them to sit there and listen to us. The mere process of getting involved in an active learning lesson where you're talking, interacting, picking things up, drawing information from your memory, that fires more brain pathways, and it leads to a deeper learning. So, you know, and I always say to teachers, if we stand on the edge of a playground at break time and look out, what do we see? We see children running around, chasing games, skipping, football. You know, one child's running off to get the equipment, another one's going to get some more friends to join in, another one turns up with some ideas for how they'll play the game. They're interacting, they're moving, and most of the time they have a smile on their face. I know that sometimes they don't, but most of the time they're enjoying themselves. What we definitely don't see is a playground full of children sitting on the floor for 20 minutes. So we've got to ask ourselves a question when we bring them back in for the next session of an hour and 20 minutes after break. Are we doing them any favors by sitting them down for that whole time and expecting them to learn when it's not what they naturally want to do? You know, children in primary can spend up to 7,000 hours potentially on a chair. And I think that's a lot of lost learning. So at Holy Family, you'll see them outside. We use Teach Active. We've used it since 2014 when it was Maths of the Day. There was a lesson going on today out in the sun, multiplication and division lesson for maths. You'll see them in the hall. You know, so again, history lesson last week for year 4. They turned it into a history museum, and they were finding out about the Tudors. There was artifacts, there was costumes, there were pictures, bits of evidence. They were piecing it all together, discussing things. We've got a room in our school called Space, which essentially was our old ICT suite years ago. And about 5 years ago, we took all the furniture out to put a curved wall at one end, and then gave them all the technology they would need. Sound, lighting, scent box, interactive floor, temperature control. And we've said to them, you can turn that space into whatever you want. Any period of history, past, present, or future, anywhere in the world. So it can be Egyptian tomb before break, the Giant's house from Jack and the Beanstalk after break, Willy Wonka's chocolate factory in the afternoon, if you want it to be. And what you get with children doing it that way is a much broader and deeper understanding of what they're doing, and they love it. And that's the most important thing about primary school. They have to love their learning.
I wonder if you could delve a bit deeper into that, because I remember you talking before to me about you did a study based on what sort of subjects that children ranked highest. If you could kind of just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's when I first went, Ali, in 2012. And as a mathematician, I asked the children to rank their subjects, favourite subjects, 1 to 10, right across the school. When we collated it, maths was 9th. And I was so traumatised, I still can't remember what was 10th. It didn't matter. Maths was just too far down the list. And in all fairness to the outgoing head, he said to me, our curriculum is old-fashioned. I called it traditional, but children they didn't love maths. They didn't love learning maths, and they didn't really see how it connected to real life. So that's what we wanted to do. That's why I brought in Maths of the Day and met up with John and got cracking with that, because it's just changed attitudes completely. Maths is in the top 3 now. We had year 2, did some biographies in the first term. 24 out of 30 of them wrote independently, either I love maths or I'm good at maths. And that's really just a reflection of, they think running around outside in the sun today is great fun, but they're learning a huge amount as they go along.
Fantastic. And you obviously touched upon mental health earlier, Steve, and especially now looking outside in the sun, like being outside and having the fresh air and getting to spend time with your friends. Have you been able to measure any other outcomes other than just the learning that you've seen have a big impact on?
Yeah, I think confidence, all those life readiness skills, Ali, that we need to function. It's really interesting. I was at a meeting not a little while ago, and 94% of employers now say, by far, life readiness skills are far more important than academic qualifications when they're selecting new members of staff. So it's things like being able to communicate, having the confidence to stand up. So as simple examples, we never have any shortage of people coming to clubs, wanting to volunteer to take part in teams, all those things that children might be nervous about. Getting up on the stage to do plays, we do in every year group from reception upwards. We always have far too many people auditioning for the parts. And that's a sign that the way they learn day in, day out, interacting, communicating, discussing, showing some belief in themselves has a massive impact on their ability to cope with different situations. And that's what we want. We want our children to go to secondary ready for everything that life will throw at them. And I think an active movement helps with that hugely. Yeah,
fantastic. If I can ask when you go to the next slide, I stole a page from your website, Steve. I thought it might be useful to share it with everyone else, because obviously a lot of it relates to the 5 key indicators of the sports premium, and that's what we look to. But you've gone wider than that, and you've kind of developed the sports premium in terms of all the different aims on the board. I wonder if you wanted to expand on any of the things you mentioned, for example, healthy lifestyles, or how you engage the least active in terms of using physical activity to do that.
Yeah, well, going right back to when I started from that first survey, I've always gone and spoken to children and asked them, who takes part in things? If you don't take part, why don't you take part? What would encourage you to come and join in? We've done every year we do a full assessment of what percentage of children have joined in, how many clubs they've been to, who's taking part in clubs outside of school, and then from there we've targeted specific groups. A couple of years ago we had a year group in Key Stage 1. It was year 2. Only about 15% of the girls were taking part in sport. And when we asked them, they said the clubs that we were running weren't what they wanted. So again, we looked at that. At the moment, we've got a girls project going on, again, for transition into year 3. Put a female role model member of staff in there, because we just want to get them active. Again, a report recently said, if you don't get your girls active and loving physical activity by year 2, you've probably lost them. certainly lost them in terms of their lifelong love of physical activity. So we've always sort of tried to look at where the strengths are, but also the areas for development. You've never cracked it in this game, as you know.
No.
And it's about constantly evolving and constantly. We're battling, aren't we, with all sorts of other things to take up children's time, particularly technology-wise. So we just need to keep moving forward and keep adapting, stay one step ahead of everything, I think.
I love the fact that you've achieving at pupils obviously could have been the kind of the top level line, but you know, I guess we're trying to move beyond the child thinking of themselves as sporty or not sporty, and that's one of the dangers that, you know, that you said with girls age 7, they tell themselves the story that they're not sporty, and then that carries on throughout their life, and you've obviously put the measures in to try and protect them from that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I never set out with any ideas or any targets about numbers in terms of academic results or performance levels. What I set out for was 100% participation. I wanted every single child to take part in every single activity going. That's all I want. I want them to enjoy it. So we've always targeted that as the main focus. Can we get everyone there? Because as we know, you don't have to be world-class athletes to love doing sport or physical activity. It's about taking part and all the social elements, that as well as the physical attributes that brings you. So yeah, that's always been a big focus of ours, participation rather than numbers.
Fantastic. If I can ask Wendy to show the next slide. I tried to condense, you're sprinkling gold dust everywhere, Steve. And last time I spoke to you, I think I had 2 or 3 pages of notes, but I tried to kind of bring it down to some of the main points. But I wonder if I can pause for a second and give teachers and yourself a chance to read it, and then ask you, Steve, if there's anything else you'd like to add that we haven't kind of spoken about already to that list.
No, I think that looks pretty good. I mean, I think it's about enjoyment. You know, again, I haven't mentioned them yet, but it's given our teachers a new lease of life. They love teaching this way, and also as a teacher, you know, if your children are doing well and your parents are happy with you, you're on cloud 9 as a teacher. So it's really, really working. But it's helped them to look at learning in a different way, and to realise that, you know, teachers work really, really, really hard. And what we've got to make sure as senior leaders is that every minute they spend on their schoolwork is going to bring huge impact for children. They can't be wasting time. And one of the great benefits of Teach Active is that because the lesson plans are there and the resources are there, you don't have to spend time as a teacher thinking about the structure. You spend all of your time looking at how am I going to adapt this lesson, change the resources so it targets the learning of every single child in my class. That's what we want. We want impact, not wasting time making up the lesson, but how is it going to suit your cohort of children, which will be different to the cohort of children in the next class or in the next school.
Fantastic. I was just checking with Wendy actually, but I think we've got a couple of minutes. So I don't know if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask. I know normally we don't do this because we've gone slightly ahead of time here, Steve, because you've done such a good job keeping to time. But if there's any questions, if you want to either drop it in the chat feed or unmute yourself for a second.
I think just to say, Ali, that you know, I speak to a lot of head teachers, and sometimes where there's a reluctance to go down to really embed this in school is because they'll say to me, but if we do all that active learning, we won't have time for work. And we have to get away from this concept that we're not learning while we're doing active work. The learning is actually deeper, and it's been proven, and you know, our outcomes prove that something is working, you know, and it's not in isolation. There has to be a whole package of high quality educational provision, but without it wouldn't work as well. I just know it wouldn't, and I've never regretted for 1 minute putting it in and keeping it going.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time and insight, Steve. It's always a pleasure. It's great to have such a great advocate in Surrey. And I'm not sure if you've got time to stick on the call and kind of as we walk through the active school movement, but yeah, if you are, obviously that'd be great.
Yeah, I can stay for a bit longer. And just to say, Ali, look, I love working. I'm really passionate about this. And if anybody out there wants to call me, email me, come and see me and ask me about anything, I'm happy to share anything I've got. If it's going to save you some time and we've done it and I can give it to you, then I'm happy to do that. So just, I'm a holy family. I'm not too far away. So.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Steve. Okay, well, if I can ask Wendy to go to the next slide, I hope everyone has a chance to do it, and I'll introduce you to, well, you've all seen PALS before and heard of PALS, hopefully, but this is our new approach. So it's about engaging pupils in regular physical activity, just like Steve mentioned, through Active Surrey's campaign to try and support you bringing 60 active minutes to all children every day, or at least an average of those 60 minutes. Next slide, please. So this is a scenario right now. Steve alluded to a lot of it, which is great. So schools are being asked to deliver the key indicator of at least 30 active minutes every day. You will receive funding, and will do next year, to demonstrate the ongoing improvement. Many of our modern habits, however, are preventing an active environment. So whilst there's a strong cohort of PE leads, and a lot of you on this call, generally in school, there's a bit of a gap in understanding of how active schools can impact that whole school development. The obesity strategy in Sport England's Towards an Active Nation outlined a rise in inactivity and obesity levels, and how it affected a wide range of health outcomes. So there's no better time than now to change the focus from just PE or just PE in school sport to also include a proper focus on physical activity and play. Next slide, please. Just thought I'd put that on the screen because it's quite a useful thing to kind of offset and show where we're at right now, especially after lockdown. Next slide, please. So it's not all about obesity. I know you're looking at a blank screen now, but physical inactivity kills almost as many people as obesity. I wasn't sure there's a picture to kind of quite show that. 1 in 6 deaths globally are caused by not being active enough. So a huge part of the active school movement is about cultivating an awareness around inactivity or looking at sedentary behaviour, as well as providing solutions that will help support you schools to make a more impactful and lasting relationship with activity in and around the school day and beyond. I'd like to now show you a short video that provides a really good summary of the context where we're at right now. For those of you who, like me, relish the opportunity to get active and get fidgety if they're sitting down too long, especially with the sun shining, you might like to stand or stretch now during the next minute and a half. If I could ask you to press play, Wendy.
We live in a world beating with urgency, breathing with difficulty, breaking under necessity. We are a society consumed by technology, compact in proximity, choked by inactivity. We are global, we are responsible, we are trending, we are too inactive. Everyone, everywhere, every day. We have a plan. It's time to activate our governments, to activate our environments, to activate our society, to activate ourselves. It's time to activate movement, to activate improvement, to reverse our direction, to activate new trends. We need to alert you. We need to activate. Everyone, everywhere, every day.
I know that's not focused on schools, but we know it's not just a school issue, and we're not all putting it on your shoulders. However, saying that, school is where so many habits, like Steve mentioned earlier, are formed, and where every person spends a huge part of their childhood. And we can go to the next slide, please. So, what does learning look like, and how can we make that more active? You can press next slide again, just to bring the table up. I think one more. There we go. So there's a disconnect right now, and I'm trying to be upfront. I know it's not the same in every school, but between early years learning and Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. We know that categorically, children don't change the way they learn or remember things. Children and adults still learn through experiencing things, through action, and not just seeing and listening. Movement supports learning in an active and related way. So I wonder if I can ask you kind of rhetorically, if movement is key, how can we best utilize movement to benefit the whole child? I think Steve's notes probably will tell us a lot of the answers there, but we can go to the next slide. So I know I've used minions here, but hopefully it gives you kind of a good picture of what we don't want happening and what currently is happening far too often. So as you journey through the school day from top left around clockwise to kind of 10 o'clock, children spend a long time sitting down and outside school, maybe even more than they do in school sometimes. Next slide, please. Unless we want more of this, that's what's currently happening. What's my slide then? Thank you. So these are the guidelines. Oh, I'm going a bit fast there, sorry. I think someone's pressing this slide. These are the guidelines for what you should be trying to achieve. Hopefully you've seen them before. If you haven't, I'd ask you to kind of look at the list at the top, because actually it's not just about being active. It's not just our traditional view of sport or physical activity. It's also just not sitting down. It's also strengthening. It's also looking for those coordination skills and confidence and social skills, like Steve mentioned earlier. How can we get more opportunities for children to move more? How can we embrace opportunity to sit less in the classroom? How can we embrace the outside, even when it's not beautiful sunshine like it is today, outside of just PE and school sport? And those of you lucky enough to be in Louise Edwards' session later on, she'll talk to you about outdoor learning. Next slide, please. So here's a code on the screen. And what I'm going to ask you to do now, if that's all right, is either get your phones or open up a separate web browser on your computer. You need to go to www.menti.com and then use that code. And whilst that's on display, I'm going to ask Wendy if I can just share my screen instead now. So it should be live. Yeah. So if I can ask you to share some of your great ideas, it can be the simple, small changes, or it can be big things your school's doing right now already. But how can you get kids moving more during the school day? So we'll just leave that screen open for the next minute or so. If you can go to that code at the top in that website, and then when it gives you the options, just put in your ideas. Fantastic. Great start, whoever did that. Let's start tracking our website. I always love when someone mentions Jumpstart Johnny, or anything Active Surrey does. Thank you, whoever mentioned Run the World. Keep your eyes peeled for something Charlie's going to mention later on. I will send this slide as a PDF to make sure Wendy sends it on afterwards. So don't worry if you haven't written down all the answers yet. One question I would pose to you whilst we're writing this is, I think we're really lucky to work with some amazing PE leads. And I know a lot of you have a lot of responsibilities around the school. Some of you are SLT and some of you are head teachers. Ask yourself the question, are other classes in your school doing the same level of activity as you are? How can you help your fellow staff embrace some of the ideas we're seeing on the screen now? Another few seconds and I'll let Wendy share. Trump me again. Wendy, do you want to reshare your screen, and then I think it should override me. must say, I did love the bottom answer about trying to incorporate an element of movement into every lesson. That's a really great shout. So where are we at? 1 second. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is our campaign. We've created it not just to share ideas, because a lot of the ideas actually come from you, which is great, but to also support you to influence behaviour change. And there is no better place for behaviour change than an environment surrounded by experts in behaviour. Schools, because teachers, you're great, and you know this. We're told that the 3 elements that we must converge on at the same moment for behaviour to occur are motivation, ability to make a change, and a prompt. But prompts only work well when motivation and ability to make the change are high. And motivation is stimulated by success. So what we've done is try to create an approach through Active Schools movement by using success as a trigger to making prolonged and sustained change. We encourage you not to look for huge or hard to achieve steps, but pledge to simple strategies that enable you and your pupils to see and feel success early on, and then use that as a catalyst for some of the longer lasting benefits. Steve already talked about a lot of those. Next slide, please. I'm a fan of rhetorical questions, so I've posed another one here. So if we need a whole school vision, that's great, but are the benefits of physical activity both in and out of classroom clear to all? Next slide, please. I'm sure a lot of you would have a vision, something similar to that, but what does that mean and what can it mean to pupils as they start the school day and then leave it? And even through home environment too. Next slide. My colleague Bob, if you ever see him from behind, you'll recognize him now. How do we create those steps to success? How can we make it successful early on to make sure it's sustained? Next slide, please. One method, and I love talking about this in meetings, is trying to break down the school day, address the timetable, address the routines and children's concentration times. Have a think about, like the suggestion on the Menti, how can you incorporate movement into every lesson? Next slide, please. So here are a few solutions. I'll just leave those on the board for you to have a look at and have a think about. Again, we've designed our conference around facilitators who can talk a lot more about these. Next slide, please. I want to just put a sort of reminder out there that it's a revolution, not an evolution. It has to be fitting to what your school environment currently looks like. As Steve alluded to earlier, the impact isn't just to benefit kids, it's also about the whole community and making sure teachers feel empowered as well. Next slide, please. I'm going to use a phrase here. I think I actually stole it from Steve Tyndall. He's got a lot of phrases I like to steal. But in terms of evolution, I think the phrase "don't try and run before you can walk, but just don't sit still" is a really good idea. So yeah, have a think about those things where you can start walking rather than trying to go straight into potentially a daily mile off the bat, and then potentially sense that failure. But look at what you can do to make those children and teachers feel empowered by the movement that you're trying to create. Look at incorporating movement into the school day wherever you can. Look for tiny habits you can implement and then have a multiplying effect. Look to whole school changes, but also look at targeted approaches. But try and see the changes through. We know success doesn't happen overnight, but in the long run, we also know that being more active is great for the body and mind. I also want to kind of put it out there that we know that change is a process, not an event. So, don't be afraid of small failures, because that will build you to where you want to be in the future. What you can see on the screen, unfortunately, we're going to look at one of these later where a school has filled it in, but this is our one-page version now of what the Active School movement will look like. So we'll work through with you, with giving as much support as is needed to target those quick wins and long-term solutions, or the idea that we can build towards that impact that we talked about earlier and Steve talked about earlier. So just looking at one or two or how many ideas you want to and solutions we can put in place with you around that travel, what you do in class, how you use your play ideas, even within class sometimes, and then what you do to support the home environment. We can go to the next slide, please. So where do you go next? I guess that's the big question. We know that there's not one solution to solve the inactivity epidemic. If there was, we'd probably all be doing it already. There are some fantastic solutions out there, some of which we'll hear about in today's breakout sessions. A couple of other great initiatives you might like to get involved with, if I can ask Wendy to kind of click through slowly for a few I've shared with you. So mention the Daily Mile. England Does the Daily Mile is doing a registration for a one-off big kind of bonanza event on the 30th of April. I think Alana's going to share something in the chat, so you can register if you'd like to for that. That might be a good catalyst to get involved, or it might be something you've already involved with that you want to kind of get involved in a more national campaign. If you can kind of click through a few more times, Wendy. Hopefully a lot of you know about our Fizzy Fun initiative. The picture at the top as well is also something we're now introducing called Fizzy Fun Fit Bags, where we'll support you helping the home environment. We want to support schools as best we can. So I guess the biggest thing you can do to get involved, and sorry, one more click, Wendy, if that's all right. And that's our desk size post I hope you've had a taste of, is just pledge. So pledge to make a difference, pledge to make a change for yourself and also to connect with us. If you pledge before to pals, I'd ask you to re-pledge, and Alana will share that link in the chat feed. We'll also send it through afterwards. It's a very short form, but it just gives us a chance to connect with you and kind of tailor our support around what works best for you. But that was where I was going to leave it. I didn't want to go through too many things. I know you've got a breakout room soon, so if I can hand over to Wendy and she'll kind of wrap it up. Thanks.
Thanks, Ali. That's great. We have got a couple of minutes. So before we go into the breakout room, if anybody has got any questions that they want to ask around any of the information that Ali's just presented on, or anything that you thought of that you might want to ask Steve, if he's still around, then please do. Alana, if there's any questions that have come up in the chat that you want to raise with us now, that would be great. If not, we can move straight on to the breakout room. So I'll just give it a couple of minutes for people just to be brave if they want to be brave. I know your secret, you're sitting in the sunshine with a gin and tonic, aren't you? So I'm not going to ask anybody to share. Okay, if we are ready then, Charlie, if we can set up the breakout rooms, that would be great. So what will happen now is you'll get a notification come up on your screen that will pull you into a separate room. We know that obviously when you booked for today's session, you had a choice of three different, we asked for your three preferences of sessions. Some more popular than others, so a couple of sessions we won't be running today, but if you did opt for something that we're not running today, then obviously please do get in touch with us and we will give you that individual information about whatever the topic or initiative was. But those are the breakouts that we're going to run in the first session. When we come back from the breakout sessions, we will go straight into a 5-minute comfort break. So you're going to go into your breakout sessions for a bit, come back and then grab a drink, have a comfort break, do some stretches, do some activity, whatever you want to do. And then we'll come back and do a little bit more on the school games and then into the second breakout session towards the end of the network. So Charlie, if you're good to go, then by all means start pinging out those invites.
Yeah, perfect.
Technology. Okay. Over to you, Charlie.
On mute.
Charlie is still on mute. It didn't work.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Just can't get my version coming up. That's fine. So the school games, that was a video by the school games. The National School Games is heading in a new direction. One that we in Surrey have been heading in for a while now. This new direction is, sorry, 2 seconds. As you can see from the board, sorry, my system's playing up. As you can see from the board, the new direction that the school games is heading in is to inspire young people to be physically active for life throughout positive experiences, daily activity and competition. You will have seen that from over the past couple of years, we have been heading in this direction through our competition levels of Inspire, Aspire and Higher. And we will continue to head in this direction with more emphasis on engaging everyone in daily physical activity. In addition to this, the key messages that the school games wish to suggest through, you will be able to see the key messages on the screen in front of you. The Active Schools team are currently planning a refreshed calendar of activity for 21-22, which we will share with you in due course. Next slide, please, Wendy. Perfect. So the summer term offer for the virtual Surrey School Games is the Trek and Trail to Tokyo, which you can see in front of you now. There are several opportunities for young people in your school to take part in the summer offer. This is either the Trek to Tokyo, which you can see is the outside of the mountain. Schools are challenged to walk, run or ride the 5,966 miles from Surrey to Tokyo. Schools can take part in this challenge between Monday the 26th of April and Friday the 2nd of July. Can your school collectively reach Tokyo next term? The second opportunity that your school can take part in is the Activity Trail to Tokyo, which is the trails in the middle. There is the green line, which is for primary, which is your focus. So on there you have badminton and you have rugby as well. These are personal best activities for those specific age groups to take part in, and this culminates in a team-based festival in July at the top. Will your school be taking part? The poster you see can be used to track your involvement in next term's offer. A copy of this poster with all the details is being sent out to schools in Inside Active Schools tomorrow for you to view and incorporate into next term's delivery. The first set of primary activities on the trail are personal best, so could even be sent home to do there if you can't necessarily fit it into the school. Your Active Schools contacts will be sending you all the resources and can be viewed on our website as well. For those that submit participation data to Active Surrey for any of the opportunities, whether that's the Trek or the Trail to Tokyo, by Friday the 2nd of July, could be in with a chance of winning a free full-day karate workshop. So it's best to get involved. If you need any more details, then please get in touch with the Active Schools team, or all the details will be on the website from tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm going to let Charlie refocus on setting up the next set of breakout sessions now. So we'll move into those when she gives me the nod. But as Charlie just explained, all the details around Trek to Tokyo and the virtual school games program will be shared with you directly from our team. You'll note from the earlier slide that we talked about that the government have just announced that outdoor competition between schools is now allowed. We didn't know that when obviously we were planning our summer term school games program, so we decided to play safe and we've stuck with the virtual program for the summer school games. So there's loads of support from us around that, and we would really encourage you to get involved. But if you need any support or want any support in terms of running any inter-school competition, face-to-face competition, then do get in touch with your relevant active school lead, and they'll be able to support your schools or your district associations with that. Charlie, you're not on my screen, so I'm not sure if you're ready, but if so, give us a holler. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully those second breakout sessions were useful. We are going to hopefully wrap up early, so I'm just going to finish with a couple of slides, just kind of calls to action, and a few kind of extra bits just to share with you before we go. So I guess the first message is please just to encourage you all to embrace the active schools movement that Ali presented on earlier. There are plenty of people within the team who can support your school in getting this off the ground, or to further develop anything that you've already got going on within your school. I think hopefully we've kind of set the tone and shared plenty of messages as to why active schools are really important, if not now more so than ever before, for pupils' mental health and well-being, as well as obviously their physical well-being. So please do pledge. We've obviously shared the link to that, and all the information is on the school website, is on our schools pages on our website, and the link's on the slide in front of you. The other thing that we're still operating this term is our sports organiser squads leaders training. So virtual and face-to-face offers are still available, and you can book that through our website as well. So if you are a school that's looking to start running competition, intra or inter-school competition, we would really encourage you to start training up young leaders if you haven't already done so, to really help deliver those activities within your school. Wellbeing Warriors, some of you will hopefully be familiar with this training, but again, this is our new kind of wellbeing training, and we're still running that training this term now that schools are open, and we can come in and do that face-to-face training. So again, you can book that through the website. Charlie talked about Trek to Tokyo earlier, so we would really encourage schools to engage in that. The information will be coming out tomorrow. So you've got maybe some time over Easter whilst you're sitting in the sunshine to digest that and think about how you can implement that within your school. And then the last thing really, I suppose, is just saving a date for the next network. We will be sticking, I think, with a virtual network. We'll just sort of monitor and see how things go. If we can do that as a face-to-face event, we may well do, but we'll probably get some feedback from yourselves as to what works best and whether or not this delivery is more accessible and more convenient for you all, rather than travelling to a central venue for the next network. But the date won't change, so it's Tuesday the 30th of June, 4 till 6, if you want to pop that in your diaries.
Sorry, Wendy, just say it is a Wednesday.
It's Wednesday the 30th.
It is Wednesday the 30th, yes.
4 till 6, apologies. Yeah, so pop that date in your diary, Wednesday 30th of June, 4 till 6, and we'll let you know if that is going to be a face-to-face event, but for now we will stick with the virtual approach. I think that's it really from us. Inside Active Schools e-news will be coming out tomorrow. There are a number of training sessions taking place this term, and courses that you can book onto, so look out for that. Again, all the information is on our website if you want to book onto any training courses, or contact any of the team for individual support that you might want, or guidance for your school. So that's it from us. Thank you for joining us. We'll stick around as we usually do. If you've got any questions, then please do fire away. But that's all from us. Hope you all have a fabulous Easter holiday, a well-deserved rest, and we'll see you again in the summer term. Many thanks.